And let's discuss the situation in the field of demography. The question is fundamental, practically for any country, especially for us. For us, literally so. Either we will be or we will not be.
Since the start of the war against Ukraine, Russia has lost a lot of soldiers. By the information from the Ukrainian side, Russia has lost at least 370,000 of soldiers. According to the information of the independent project called Media Zona, working together with BBC, they have verified at least 42,284 dead soldiers, and they have verified those from open sources such as social medias and official information about somebody just being buried in the region, and just from the information known to the public. And this is only verified deaths. So some kind of volunteers, journalists, were able to verify at least 42,000 of deaths. So after that, the number of 370,000 of dead Russian soldiers, which is provided by the Ukrainian side, doesn't feel so fictional. Hello, it's me, Zach the Russian. Welcome back to my channel. For those who are the first time here, my name is Zach. I'm 22 years old Russian who left Russia because of the war against Ukraine. And today we are discussing this topic of Putin lacking soldiers and how he is going to fix this problem by trying to make people basically make more babies. In the first half of the year of the war, mostly it was a regular army of young men who was participating in the war against Ukraine. Not volunteers, not all those prisoners hired by PMC Wagner. Those were young men from regular army. And as we see by the statistics from Media Zona, most of the people who died in that half of a year when the regular army was fighting was people of my age, from 21 to 23. However, Russian army ran out of those real fast. Later, Russia started to attract volunteers and also mobilize soldiers, and it was a partial mobilization in Russia in September 2022. However, all of those people are way older than those 20 years old who were in a regular Russian army. Most of the volunteers are usually about 35 years old and older, and soldiers can be mobilized only if they are at least 25. However, wars of such scale and the war of Russia against Ukraine is one of the biggest wars in Europe since the Second World War. It is the biggest war and it needs a lot of people to win this war. However, such wars are not being won by 35 years old volunteers. They are being won by young people of my age, who have the best reaction, who have the best physical ability, and who are the fastest on the battlefield. And this is the main problem of Russia. Russia just doesn't have enough men of my age. And we just leave, of course, as I did. So I'm 22 right now, and I just remember this weird feeling when I was in my hometown, Komsomolsk-on-Amur, in the far east of Russia, and I was just going around the streets, and I was going to school, and I was always thinking, like, where are all of those guys of my age? Where are they? And at first I was thinking it's only a problem of the far east of Russia, but later, once I moved to Moscow when I was 17, I found out that no, actually people of my age, we are just lesser people. My generation of kids born from 1995 all the way to 2005, we got in a huge demographic pit. Because those were the times when the Soviet Union collapsed and the economy was at its worst condition in the last 30 years. What am I saying the worst conditions? Like people were literally starving. I remember stories of my relatives who had to go and hunt pigeons just to be able to eat some kind of protein. And because of that, because you have to hunt pigeons to survive, a lot of families did not make children. You don't want to raise a child in conditions like that. Let's look at some numbers. So in 1990, 1 year before the collapse of the USSR, at least 1,988,858 children were born, and only 1,655,993 people died. So basically, more children were born than people died. The rate of population in the 90s was plus 2.2%. However, after the collapse of the USSR, people just started to give less birth to children, and people started to die because all of this criminal level, all of the poor level of life of Russian people during that time. And so already in the year of 1995, only 1,363,808 children were born. Comparing to 1990, this is 45% less children being born. before the collapse of the USSR. Moreover, in 1995, 2,203,811 people died, which is 33% more than before the collapse of the USSR. It means that in the year of 1995, Russian population was actually not growing. No, it was going down by 5.7% a year. And my generation got into this huge demographic pit. And we, the people of my age, the ones who are supposed to be in trenches, holding those AKs, storming freaking Avdiivka. But there is just few of us because of this demographic peak. One more reason why Soviet tactics of Russian army, by just throwing this cannon fodder of Russian young men soldiers, doesn't work anymore, because of Russian women are given less birth per family than Soviet women. In 1950s, when Stalin was still alive, average Soviet women were given a birth to at least 2.81 children. Later, during Brezhnev times in the 1980s, an average Soviet woman was given a birth to at least 2.39 children. However, in the year of 2000, that changed really drastically. Are you ready? Because in the year of 2000, an average Russian woman was given a birth to only 1.2 children, 2.89 during Stalin's rule, 1.2 in the year of 2000. Putin was already a president. It is 2 times less than during Stalin's times. Accordingly, nowadays, Putin just has 2 times less young people of my age comparing to Stalin's times. If that would be Stalin right now who would wage a war against Ukraine. And we'll also have to consider that when Soviet Union collapsed, almost 180 millions of people were not anymore citizens of Russia. They were not citizens of the USSR. They were the citizens of their independent republics. If my mathematics doesn't really fool me, right now Putin has 4 times less of young people of my age to fight the war. If, let's say, Stalin would have, if he would wage this war back in the States of those times. 8 years in a row, Russia has a decline in its population, meaning that less people are being born than died. This number grew especially during the war. In the year of 2022, when the war started, the decline in the Russian population is about 500,000 of people. To be precise, it's 543,000 of people. And this is not just dead people, this is the difference between those who died and those who were born. In the first 10 months of the 2023, this difference is a little bit lower, but it's only in 10 months. And this number is 433,000 of people. As some of the demographic scientists say, this is Russian minimum in the people being born in the last 200 years. However, Putin realized it too late, when they already messed up in Ukraine and realized we have nobody else to fight with, except all those prisoners and some 40 years olds who just wants to go to the front just to escape their wives. And then they had this partial mobilization, but they did not want parents of those young soldiers to rage, and that's why they mobilized soldiers only 25 plus. Nevertheless, by the information of Media Zona, they still mobilized at least 527,000 of soldiers. And maybe this 500,000 of untrained, unskilled soldiers will be enough to hold this huge battlefront of the length of 3,700 kilometers, which is 2,300 miles. If it's hard for you to imagine that, this is basically the American border with Mexico, but longer for 640 kilometers. And maybe this 500,000 is going to be enough to hold this front line, but do you really think Putin is going to stop there? Do you really think after all this support, a lot of those independent republics shown to Ukraine, and I'm speaking about Georgia, I'm speaking about Baltic states, I'm speaking about Moldova, I'm speaking about Poland in the end, even Kazakhstan and Azerbaijan, we've seen that they sympathize to Ukraine. And of course, Putin knows it. Of course, Putin keeps this little idea that all of them are traitors. And he can live 20 years more easily, because he's 71 only. Do you think with the level of medicine he has available, he won't be able to live up to like 91 or 92? And in this 20 years, he won't be able to develop all this military now that he knows how everything is corrupt? So he has enough time to fight all those wars, but he needs to fix the main problem of birth rates. And you would ask me, so how would he raise the birth rates? It's kind of natural. Well, if you would ask me how I would try to raise it up, well, I would try to raise the level of people's life, because when you're living in poverty, when you cannot even afford eggs, and your boss at your job is gonna bring you eggs like as a big celebration gift, you don't really want to build a family in such conditions, don't you? When your average salary a year is about $8,000, you don't really want to build your family in such conditions. However, this is just an opinion of me, a soy liberal who doesn't understand anything in politics. Let's listen to the real papa of politics, Vladimir Putin. What would be his decision and what would his be solution of a dictator to this? Oppress women in their rights, restrict abortions, tell women that they should make more children and not build a career, throw in money to families for giving a birth to a child, and of course oppressing gay people and feminists.
Having many children, a large family should become the norm, a way of life for all the peoples of Russia.
It's just funny to listen to this guy talking about like a big family, about moral. It's just funny to hear it from him because of he divorced with his first wife first. He didn't marry his second wife. And why do I say his second wife? Because he lives with her. It is proven by many independent investigations. This defendant of family values started to date an 18 years old Alina Kabayeva who was doing professional ice skating, and when she was 18, he was about 49. She was literally the age of his daughter. He was still married, had children from his first marriage, and still started to date this 18 years old Alina Kabayeva. Moreover, it's just funny how he's being hypocritical about the family values, while Navalny Foundation found a whole strip room in his own private mansion in Gelendzhik by the Black Sea. One of the ways of raising the birth rates is just flexing with money, just throwing all this money to families so they would make babies. Firstly, if you are a family with at least 3 children, you can apply for subsidized mortgage. So if you want to buy an apartment, you would pay only 6% of interest and the rest will be paid by the government. And I guess you would ask, 6% is kind of high, isn't it? Well, no, Russia has really high percentage interest for mortgage. For average people, it would cost at least 19% of interest just to get mortgage. But if you are having at least 3 children in your family, it's only 6%. Moreover, the government literally gives you money for giving birth to children. There is a program called Motherhood Capital. It was established in the year of 2007, and before they were just giving money for families if you give a birth to a second and a third child. But however, recently in the year of 2023, they became so generous, I wonder why, maybe because they need new soldiers, and they started to give money for families even if they just give birth to one child. So if you're giving a birth to one child, you are going to be given $7,200 just for giving birth to one child. They want women to give birth to as many people as possible. And that's why for the second and the third and the fourth, etc., for all of those children, you would get at least $9,500 for one child. Another way they're trying to bring up the birth rates is by restricting the access to abortions. And those who were restricting it, they were saying that there is a direct correlation between the amount of abortions made and the birth rates. But let's see if that's true. In Mordovia, in Tverskaya Oblast, Pskovskaya Oblast, Kaliningradskaya Oblast, Kurskaya Oblast, Novgorodskaya Oblast, in many regions of Russia, it is a misdemeanor to try to make someone to make an abortion. And what does it mean to make someone to make an abortion? Like, let's say you are pregnant and your friend, your female friend says you, hey, why do you keep it? Don't ruin your life. And eventually you go and do abortion. What she did, she made you to do an abortion. It is a misdemeanor, and she's gonna pay at least $3,000 rubles, but in some regions it goes up to 50,000 rubles. And guess who was the person to offer such laws? Patriarch Kirill, the head of the Russian Orthodox Church. Moreover, in the lower part of the Russian parliament, they start to say that we need to check all those medical hospital, maternity hospitals, which are giving abortions, So they would have a strictly policies, and they would make women to spend more time with psychologists before they would be allowed to do a final abortion. So now if you just want to go and make an abortion, they will give you a week. And during this week, you have to work with psychologists. And they have to try to change your mind. So basically, you would decide to keep a baby and to bring up the birth rates. So later, Putin can send more soldiers to the front lines. Yeah. Nevertheless, most of the Russians, to be precise, 67%, think that women to have a right for abortion. That was a study conducted by the project called Russian Field, and at least 1,600 participants were called in different regions of Russia and asked that question. And 67% of those said that they support women's right for abortion. And one of the funniest deputies of the Russian lower parliament, Gosduma, Vitaly Milonov, he said that we cannot just ban abortions right away. And the reason for this is not because he's pro-choice. No, he just says that because of the ruling of communists and because of the ruling of Democrats, our societies are messed up and our society is not moral enough. Another freak show, a deputy from the lower bracket of the Russian parliament, Yumasheva Inga, says that without restricting abortions, Russia will not win the special military operation.
Victory over fascism in a special military operation is impossible without victory over fascism internally. Abortion at will is the killing of an innocent person due to inconvenience, inability, ill health, and untimeliness. We need to call evil by its name.
The vice speaker of Gosduma, the lower bracket of the Russian parliament, Pyotr Tolstoy, says this. Right now, on the regional levels, I hear different initiatives about restricting rights to abortions, but I would go with a different way. Let the doctor who changed the opinion of a woman to do an abortion to get a benefit at about 20 or 30,000 of rubles. This is going to be the best stimulus to save lives of not born children. I think this is a great startup for doctors. If I would be a doctor, I would just go to the streets and put those advertisements. Hey, you're pregnant and thinking about abortions? Hey, come here. You know, I'm gonna get 30K, you're gonna get 15K. Deal. And then they say there is no business opportunities in Russia. Here you are. The speaker of the higher bracket of the Russian parliament, Valentina Matviyenko, she says that women should only be able to get abortions in 2 cases. In case of rape, and in case of some kind of medical danger. And so all of those people who want to restrict rights to abortions, they say that it's gonna bring up the birth rates up. It's gonna skyrocket. But eventually, it doesn't really happen. Because in the last 10 years, the amount of abortions made in Russia decreased by 2.3 times. However, the birth rate is basically the same. It's not going down or up drastically. But do you know what changed and why there is a decrease in the Russian population? Death. Death increased, and we all know why. Another thing what they do, they are trying to restrict access for Plan B pills. For those who doesn't know, that's a pill that basically prevents pregnancy in the really like 1 or 2 hours after the sexual contact. And what the Ministry of Health offers to prohibit all private clinics from selling those Plan B pills and only selling those by prescription. How can you potentially use a Plan B pill if you need to firstly get a prescription? So you need to get an appointment for a doctor. You're gonna go to a doctor gonna write you a prescription, and only then you go to the governmental pharmacy, and only then you'll be able to buy and use it. And it may be late. And of course, all those Russian deputies, and especially men, they are trying to put a stigma on women who are trying to build a career. They want to say that no, you should build not a career, but you should build a family instead. Another way to increase birth rates, by the opinion of Kremlin, is to ban gay people. 30th of November 2023, the Constitutional Court, the most highest court in Russia, prohibited the international movement of LGBT. What kind of movement? Like with the headquarters at the Washington DC CIA movement? Like, as it goes from the decision of that court that this LGBT movement was created in 1960s for restricting the birth rates in the US. So basically, any kind of public LGBT activism can be considered as a participation in an extremist group. So basically, if you just go and fight for ISIS or Al Qaeda or Taliban, and then you just say, hey, I'm gay, it is the same. It is literally the same for them. If you participate in some kind of LGBT organization, that's a felony, up to 6 years in jail. If you donate money to some kind of LGBT organization or some kind of LGBT activist, it's a financing terrorist organization, up to 8 years in jail. And if you create, God forbid, any kind of organization related to LGBT, up to 10 years in jail. Moreover, the Constitutional Court of Russia even recognized the use of feminitives as one of the signs you are part of LGBT, so you are a terrorist. And what is feminitives? Well, Russian language is kind of like Spanish. We have those endings, and every word in the Russian language has different gender. And so let's say doctor. We used to say doctor for everyone, for males and females. But a lot of feminists nowadays, they are making feminitives and they are adding those endings that makes it obvious that the person who is behind the profession is female. And they would say not doctor, but doktorka. And that's what makes you a terrorist by the opinion of the higher court of Russia, Constitutional Court. In July 2023, Putin also signed a law that prohibits people to change their sex. You are also prohibited to change your sex. Any kind of hospital is going to reject you. Maybe even gonna tell police about you. And all of those marriages that were created between transgender people and who were like, let's say, male transgender to females, and then like married another male, so M and F, all of those marriages are basically not real anymore. They are nulled. Yeah, I guess if you just prohibit people to be gay, they just, oh, I cannot be gay anymore. I'll be straight. Okay, Mr. Putin, thank you. Okay, I gotcha. Thank you so much. You made me straight. I'm just going to make babies right now, on my way. Another way Putin can kind of compensate the decrease in the Russian population is by allowing immigrants to come to Russia easily and to get a Russian passport easily too. For example, in September 2022, Putin signed a law that allows foreigners to receive a Russian passport if they participate in the war against Ukraine. And overall, Putin makes it easy to migrate to Russia, and there is a lot of people actually who want to do it from Africa, from Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, Afghanistan even. However, what do Russian nationalists, the so-called Z people, think about this? Well, obviously they hate this idea because most of them, they hate non-Slavic people. Putin does not care. Putin is a guy born in the USSR. Putin is the person who wants the USSR back. He works for KGB. His main goal as a worker of KGB was to keep the Soviet regime. Well, he messed up and everyone else messed up, which is good. I'm not living in the USSR anymore. However, those nationalists, they dream in nights about the great Russian Empire, where Russians were the title nation. Not like in the USSR, where Soviets were trying to promote this idea of the friendship between nations and everyone's equal and everyone's the same, and they didn't hate Jews that much at the first. But the Russian nationalists, no, they want Russians to be the main title nation and not less. And of course, what Putin does right now is making them angry. But Putin is ready to do that anyway, because he puts their main leader, the sad boy, Igor Girkin-Strelkov, in jail. So what are they gonna do? Putin needs new soldiers. It is obvious that Putin needs new soldiers. Even if he'll be done with Ukraine in the next couple of years, he's still gonna be living easily for 20 more years. He's only 71. His parents lived like 83, 87 as far as I remember. Like, he has good genetics. He did a lot of sports when he was in teenage years. He does say he doesn't drink. I don't believe that, looking at his swallowed face. But anyway, with the level of medicine he has access to, he can live longer and he can wage more wars with other countries, which I listed before, and he needs more soldiers for that. And I explained to you today how he's trying to bring the birth rates up and eventually get more soldiers for future wars against other countries. Thank you for watching this video. If you want to support me, there are links to PayPal and there is also links to Patreon. I'm currently right now starting to fundraise money for my second year of college, so if you want to support me, links are in the description below. Don't forget to support Ukraine, they need it more. And as usual, I wish there's going to be peace in Ukraine and freedom in Russia. See ya in the next videos. Bye.